overwhelmed by the fact that we are taking essentially.
The Browns' narrative was always complicated. The fans watched for the soap, the strife, the so-called realism of a plural family struggling to make it in contemporary America. What if I told you that much of what you've witnessed? Every explosive fight, every sobbing confession, every dramatic revelation was more than coincidence. What if there existed a document, kept secret from the public, that planned out the demise of the family as a whole? It started as whispers. Season 20 was looming, and TLC was insisting on something more, something that would surpass all 19 seasons prior to it. The ratings had hit a ceiling, and the network craved dynamic material to provide. Kody Brown made a decision: defend his family or sell their lives to the cameras. What he chose to do would haunt them all. In a generic office, miles from the beaming family photos and the posed dinners, an agreement was written. It was lengthy, thick, and full of conditions that most would read over without even realizing the harm they held. But this was no ordinary television contract. It was a blueprint, meticulously written to build drama, tension, and conflict, even if it meant burning real relationships. Kody was handed the document. The attorneys slid it over the gleaming table, their pens poised, their words practiced. They referred to it as standard. They promised him it was required, but hidden amongst those many pages were provisions that changed everything. And Kody, either desperate to stay in the game or blinded by the prospect of cash, didn't bat an eye. He signed. Christine and Janelle had felt for years that things weren't quite right. With each season, the emphasis slid further toward embarrassment. Staged battles became spectator events. Kids' struggles were presented not as learning moments, but as setups for melodramatic cliffhangers. Even the divorces, raw and agonized, seemed less decisions and more scripted scene fairs. It wasn't until season 20's leaked contract that they knew why. It was Christine who first came upon it. She was sorting through financial documents, receipts, tax returns, papers that had been sent to her in the course of a routine disclosure. Inside one manila folder was something she wasn't entitled to see: a draft of the season 20 contract, signed by Kody, sealed by attorneys, and full of language that made her blood freeze. She was sitting at her kitchen table, the late night lamp casting shadows over the pages. At first, it was muddled, legal mumbo-jumbo, fine print, and paragraphs upon paragraphs. But gradually, the pieces started falling into place. There were parts on mandatory filming of domestic conflicts, provisions that made the Browns open themselves up to intrusion into their private lives, even where children were involved. And then there was the financial part. This was where Christine's hands started to tremble. The contract not only regulated what occurred in front of the camera, it regulated who had access to the money. All of the dollars earned from the show went through an account that Kody managed. There was no equitable sharing. No openness. Worse still were provisions that imposed financial fines on wives who did not cooperate. If Christine or Janelle refused to shoot a scene, they would be fined. If they left the show, they would be liable for breach of contract. It was a setup, and it had been planned to keep them attached not just to the show but to Kody himself. The revelation was heartbreaking. Christine had spent decades feeling as though her independence was being taken from her. But here was the evidence. Kody hadn't merely failed to shield his wives. He had willingly signed them into a prison of his own creation. When she revealed it to Janelle, the response was instant. Janelle's serene, rational self unhinged. She flipped through the pages, increasing her rage, her eyes moving from clause to clause. This is no longer about family. She breathed. This is about control. And then they came to the section that revealed it all. Storylines. The agreement mandated that the Browns produce specific narrative arcs. Brawls must be captured on camera, kisses staged, secrets spilled on demand. Even weddings and breakups were presented as necessary to the success of the show. The women came to grasp with terror that their lives weren't merely being recorded. They were being scripted, abruptly, things that had terrorized them, started to become clear. The fiery blow-ups over money, the weeks long international breakups, the public disintegration of private anguish. It was all encouraged, if not directly demanded, by the contract Kody had signed. The producers didn't observe. They manipulated. And Kody, rather than protecting his family, had given them the reins. Christine felt ill. She had thought for years that leaving the marriage was her choice, the product of weariness and sorrow, but now she wondered. Had her leaving been pushed, prodded, even written? Had Kody been a part of taking her suffering and making money off of it? Janelle, too, felt the ground shift beneath her. She had tolerated so much under the belief that the show was at least documenting their truth. Now she saw that it had been manipulated all along. "We're not living a life," she told Christine that night. "We're living a storyline, and Kody sold it to them." But as bad as the expose was, the contract had something worse. Deep in the small print was a section detailing what would occur if the wives decided to resist. Legal proceedings, bankruptcy, even custody fights could be used against them if they fought. It was as if all avenues of escape had been closed off. Christine crumpled the papers and gripped them in her hand, hoping somehow that holding on to them would restore reality to her. She recognized this was not simply about her. It was not even strictly about Janelle. This was about all of them, the children, the other wives, the whole family unit. They had been sold piece by piece, scene by scene, until all that was left was a show. This contract was never meant to get out. It was meant to remain sealed away, locked behind corporate walls and non-disclosure agreements. But now that the truth was in their possession, Christine and Janelle were faced with a decision: stay quiet and complicit, or reveal the deal that had dismantled their family from the inside out. They sat in silence that evening, the heaviness of the revelation weighing over them. Christine broke the silence at last, her tone whisper, thin. "He didn't merely betray us," she said. "He tore us apart. And now the entire world has to know." The setup was complete. The truth was revealed, but the consequences, they knew, were only just getting underway. The leak was not a document. It was a mirror, reflecting all of the suspicions that Christine and Janelle had held for years but had never been able to substantiate. For years, they had convinced themselves that the constant drama was simply the natural tension of plural marriage. But with the contract laid out before them, they could see the truth. Much of their angst had been constructed. Christine sat in her living room, the documents fanned out on the table like the evidence of a crime scene. Every clause sounded like a confession. There were mandates for season-long tension arcs, provisions that at least one wife is to be seen as estranged at some point or another, and even monetary rewards for relationship milestones. A term that made Christine feel ill. Divorce, separation, even communication breaking down. Everything had been sold. Janelle paced the room, jaw clenched, fists balled. She was not a woman to lose her temper often, but this had shaken her. "He knew," she repeated and repeated, as if attempting to make the words true. "He knew what this would do to us, and he signed anyway." The deal spelled it out. Kody wasn't only an accomplice to their suffering, he was making money off of it. With each scene that ripped the family asunder, there was cash in his pocket. With each degrading argument filmed, his grip tightened. Christine lifted one page and read out loud, her voice shaking. "Players consent to play conflict-based scenes when production calls on them, and refusal can lead to penalties and money." She glared at Janelle, her eyes brimming with anger. "That means when we yelled, when we cried, when our children witnessed us crying, it wasn't real, it was on script." Janelle paced over and settled heavily into the chair across from Christine. Her tone was low but biting. "We believed we were fighting for survival, but we were merely fueling the machine." And then, as if the betrayal wasn't bad enough, they discovered something even more sinister. The financial provisions didn't only pay out funds to Kody. They actually limited the wives from financial independence. Sponsorship rules, prohibitions on freelance work, and provisions which attached their income from other businesses back to the family pot, which Kody managed. It wasn't exploitation. It was financial entrapment. Christine's mind went back to all the moments she had longed to work on projects of her own, to create something outside the shadow of sister wives. Each time, Kody had shot her down, told her it wasn't practical, reminded her the family required her focus elsewhere. Now she knew the truth. It wasn't about practicality, it was about control. He hadn't wanted her to be a success on her own, because the contract wouldn't permit it. Janelle's face set as she riffled through another page. See this? She directed a finger at a row of tiny print. If one wife won't shoot, the other's portions can be cut, so if I wouldn't do something, you'd be penalized also. He set us against each other. Christine. He signed something that made us bear his weight, and he got to walk free. The gravity of those words weighed like lead. Christine recalled the jealousy, the resentment, the constant suspicion among the wives. So many times, she had questioned why they turned against one another, rather than supporting each other. Now she knew the contract had been made to divide them. If one pushed back, they all paid the price. It was a flawless system, made to break them and leave Kody unscathed. But if Christine and Janelle were stunned, what about Meri? What about Robyn? They argued whether to tell the others, but the danger was huge. The contract contained stringent non-disclosure provisions, with suits and financial ruin threatened if they revealed it publicly. Christine clamped her teeth together as she thought of her kids. Could she expose them to a lawsuit just to make something public? Janelle was more firm, though. We can't remain silent, she said. It is not just about us any longer. It is about every deception we've made to the audience. Every moment we allowed them to think this was real. We owe it to ourselves and to them. But Christine wasn't prepared. She required room to breathe, to think. She folded the contract up again and pushed it into a drawer, as if concealing it might gain them a bit of tranquility. But there was none. Not even in her sleep could she avoid its suffocating presence. Weeks became days, and the information seethed between them. For the cameras, they smiled, they fought. They performed their duties as required. But in private, every look carried the burden of betrayal. Every take felt like testimony in a case they hadn't been willing to defend. While Kody went about his business as usual, he marched through the homes of the family, lecturing and posturing, being the patriarch. Christine and Janelle had heard it all before now. They could see the strings that pulled with each move, the invisible ink of the contract writing every step. And finally, the moment they could no longer deny, Christine's daughter, who had been so attuned to the unease in the home, looked up at her mother and asked her why the cameras remained if everyone was so miserable. Christine's heart shattered. How could she tell her that the misery wasn't an accident, that it had been signed into being by the man who was meant to keep them safe? She went to Janelle that evening, her resolve firm. "We can't let this go on," she said. "If we do, then we're just as guilty as he is." Janelle nodded, her eyes ablaze. "Then we fight. We don't let him bury us under this." The choice had been made. Quietly, carefully, they started to contact. Not attorneys yet, but sources. Individuals who might assist them in grasping the enormity of the paper that lay in their hands. An accountant, someone who had legal expertise as a friend. An old producer who had quietly withdrawn from TLC years earlier. Bit by bit, they started to untangle the web. What they learned unsettled them further. This was not just about season 20. The clauses, the loopholes, the money messes. They had been around for years. Kody had signed contracts like this before, each pulling the noose a little tighter. Season 20 was not the start of their ruin. It was the culmination of a scheme that had been brewing all along. Christine glared at the proof, her breast constricted. "He betrayed us long before we knew it," she breathed. "And we never had a fighting chance." The reality was irrefutable now. The downfall of the family was not only emotional but contractual as well. And the man who had guaranteed them love, fidelity, and togetherness had been the architect of their loss all along. But to tell the truth would be war. War against Kody, against TLC, against the very system that had catapulted them to fame. And Christine and Janelle understood this one thing. Once they talked, there would be no turning back. The contract was not a sheet of paper. It was a ticking time bomb. And season 20 was about to explode. They didn't choose to go up against Kody lightly, but once Christine and Janelle had witnessed enough, there was no turning back. They had lain awake at nights talking in hushed tones in kitchens, reading through documents by flickering lamplight, following the trail of deceit line by line until they realized the full extent of what they were fighting against. The agreement wasn't only a breach of faith, it was a tool, meant to silence and keep them subservient, while Kody had every advantage. The initial fissure occurred when Christine cornered him in the Flagstaff home, her words shaking not with terror but with rage. She gripped the folder in her hands, the pages creased from repeated reading. "What is this, Kody?" she insisted, her voice slicing through the musty hush of the room. He looked at the folder, awareness flashing across his face before he covered it with that old patriarchal swagger. "It is business," he replied flatly, as if one small word could wash away the years of suffering he had signed them into. But Christine wasn't about to back off. She smacked the folder down onto the table, papers spilling out as if they were confessions. "Busyness. This is business. You sold us. You signed away our lives, every battle, every tear, every humiliation. You ensured it would occur because it made your pockets fat." Kody's face hardened, the mask slipping into anger. "You don't get it how this works, none of you ever did. I've been taking care of this family, ensuring we had a roof over our heads, that we remained in the public eye. Without this contract, we'd have been nothing." Janelle entered then, her voice firm, calm, but with steel edging. "Without this contract, perhaps we'd have had peace. Perhaps our children might not have grown up seeing their mothers ripped apart for the sake of ratings. You didn't keep us safe, Kody. You trapped us." Kody hesitated for a second. His eyes jumped to the papers, then back at them. But rather than regret, he doubled up. "Do you think Christine's cooking classes or Janelle's health business could have funded 18 kids? Do you think TLC would have lingered if I hadn't provided them with drama? This was survival. And if you don't approve, perhaps you shouldn't have taken advantage." That term, benefits, rang in Christine's ears like a slap. She remembered all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, the years of therapy sessions for the kids, the embarrassment of seeing her marriage fall apart before the entire nation. Benefits. There were no benefit scars. The argument became heated, voices escalating, insults hurled. The kids, eavesdropping, ran to their rooms, terrorized by the storm raging downstairs, and in the midst of it all stood Robyn. Her face ashen, her voice shaking as she attempted to soothe the situation. "We can't do this," she whispered. "They'll annihilate us if you defy the contract." Her words were like a heavy burden. Christine lashed out at her, amazed. You knew, and remained quiet." The silence from Robyn was enough answer. Janelle felt a sinking in her heart. If Robyn did know, and remained with Kody, then the betrayal ran deeper than they had supposed. It wasn't Kody alone. It was conspiracy. That evening, Christine couldn't sleep. The confrontation brought her to clarity, but to despair. Kody wasn't going to take fault, and Robyn wasn't going to stand with them. That left only one way to go: exposure. Exposure carried consequences with it. Though the contract outlined them in hard legal language, suits, money damages, even criminal charges if they breached confidentiality. TLC had covered its bases. Christine lay awake in the dark, weighing the odds. Would she risk her children's future on a battle that could ruin her? Would she risk losing everything to speak the truth? Janelle, though, was not. The following morning, she phoned Christine and informed her bluntly. We can't live in secrecy. If we let this remain hidden, then each season will continue to repeat the same horror. Our children will grow up believing we consented to it. We can't allow that to be their legacy. With that, they started plotting, not wild, not boisterous, but cautious, measured steps towards the truth. They reached out to associates in hushed tones, posing their inquiries as what-ifs. They compiled evidence, bank records, emails, texts, anything that might attest to the degree of Kody's involvement. Each new bit of information revealed the same image. He had constructed a fortune on their pain, and he had no plans on relinquishing it. But Kody was not ignorant. He felt their distance, the turn of their eyes from tired wives to stern opponents. He clamped down harder, insisting on more openness with finances, challenging where they were, and relying strongly on Robyn for approval. Christine and Janelle's disobedience to him wasn't disobedience in his mind. It was betrayal of his authority, and betrayal had a price. He started whispering to the children, sowing seeds of doubt. Your mothers don't understand the sacrifices I've made, he would say. They want to ruin everything we've built. The manipulation stung, but Christine and Janelle had expected it. They knew Kody's greatest weapon wasn't the contract. It was his ability to twist the truth until even his victims doubted themselves. But this time, they were armed. They had proof, and they were no longer afraid to use it. And then the turning point arrived when a former employee of TLC came forward. Anonymously, after hearing rumors of their quest for answers, the message was brief. You are right. The contract is worse than you think, and I can help you prove it. It was the opening they had been seeking, the confirmation that their struggle was not in vain. Christine read the message to Janelle, her hands trembling. If this is true, Janelle whispered, then we have hope. We can at last tell the world what he did. But even while hope glimmered, danger threatened. Kody was no longer just a husband or a father. He was a man with contracts behind him, with lawyers behind him, with a network that had invested millions in keeping him on television. Bringing him down would be akin to pulling a strand in a web so tightly spun that it could choke them in the act. Nevertheless, Christine and Janelle realized there was no other choice. The contract had killed their trust, their solidarity, their family. And now, if they dared, it could possibly kill Kody's empire. The game was afoot. The actors awaited. Season 20 was not just another chapter in the Browns saga. It was going to be the season that brought everything to an end. The communication from the EXTLC employee had created an opportunity Christine and Janelle had previously only fantasized about. For months they had suspected, discovered bits, pieced together half-truths, but now, at last, someone on the inside was telling them their worst nightmares. The note had been brief, cryptic, but enough to put fire in both of them. They planned their clandestine call, making sure not to leave any digital fingerprints that might lead back to Kody or the network. When the voice eventually broke through the line, it was heavy, guarded, but burdened with the gravity of truth. The employee verified that the contracts were not only manipulative, but were specifically designed to incite conflict, to stage chaos while preserving the facade of reality. It was never about your lives, the source said. It was about ratings. You were pawns in a game meant to tear you apart for entertainment. And Kody knew. He signed willingly, season after season. He negotiated clauses that put him in power, that kept him at the center of the narrative. He sold you out because he wanted to be the star. The words cut deep. Christine clapped her hand to her breast, as if to calm her heart rate, and Janelle held the phone so hard her knuckles whitened. They demanded evidence, paperwork, something that would stand up to scrutiny in court, or the media. The insider vowed to send files, reproductions of contracts, email threads between producers and Kody, where on-camera conflict strategies were planned like a game of chess. When those files came in, Christine and Janelle sat in shocked silence, reading line after line of irrefutable proof. There were emails suggesting Christine should be pushed to her breaking point during season 17. Memos recommending that Janelle's loyalty to Kody be tested through staged confrontations about finances. Even notes about Meri's emotional vulnerability being ripe for storyline exploitation. Each document was like a dagger. The women knew their suffering had been staged. Their families offered up for lines to follow, and Kody had been in on it all along. Christine whispered between sobs, "We weren't living, we were puppets." The more they read, the clearer their resolve became. But resolve was not enough. They needed a strategy. Janelle, being the practical one, started drawing up possibilities. Legal recourse was risky, but a possibility if they had sufficient evidence. Exposing themselves in the media would work, but could be met with retaliatory measures from TLC's lawyers. Christine preferred to speak their truth publicly, regardless of what happened next. If we don't speak up, then they win. Kody wins. The network wins. And we remain stuck forever. She broke, but her resolve was strong. But Kody wasn't blind. He could feel their distance, the whispers at midnight, the secretive phone calls suspicion gnawed at him, and he started tightening his grip. He insisted on access to accounts, questioned their loyalty in front of the children, and pressed harder on Robyn, portraying himself as the wronged patriarch being victimized by bitter wives. They don't see the big picture, he said to Robyn, dripping with self-righteousness. They're attempting to dismantle all we've constructed, but we can't give them that victory. Robyn, caught between fear and loyalty, attempted to calm him, but her own unease was increasing. She knew Christine and Janelle weren't careless. They would only try open defiance if they possessed something powerful. And that thought scared her half to death. Meanwhile, the insider cautioned Christine and Janelle to watch their step. TLC's contracts were rock solid, and the company had silenced critics in the past. Rumors of gag orders, private settlements, and even threats swirled backstage. The more Christine and Janelle defied them, the more at risk they were. Fear no longer held sway over them, though. Christine remembered her children, the nights they'd sobbed demanding to know why their father treated them like props. Janelle considered her economic freedom, the years she had toiled under censorship aimed at keeping her bound to Kody's empire. They couldn't go back now. They started keeping everything on record, recording communications with Kody, archiving text messages, listing all the contradictions in his account. Each element was added to the mounting evidence, a bulwark of truth that could one day bring down the empire he founded on deceit. The family tension reached breaking point. Filming for season 20 went on, but the cameras couldn't conceal the cracks. Christine's smiles were forced. Janelle's placidity was overlaid with defiance, and Kody's rants became ever more unhinged as he struggled to keep control. The viewers picked up on it, although they didn't understand why. Speculation ran wild in online forums. Was something more going down behind the scenes? Were Christine and Janelle scheming something extreme? The gossip only empowered Christine. The viewers believe they understand the story, she said to Janelle one evening, but they only know what he has made them see. When the truth finally emerges, it will destroy everything. Things reached a breaking point when Kody confronted them head-on, waving his own copy of the contract in front of them like a shield. "You can't win," he sneered. "This paper keeps me safe. It keeps the show safe. You defy it, and you'll lose everything. Your money, your reputation, even custody of the kids if necessary. Consider what you stand to lose." His threat was supposed to scare her, but it sparked fire instead. Christine gazed at him with cold determination. "We've already lost everything that counts, Kody. You just don't know it yet." Janelle spoke softly. "And when this all falls apart, it won't be us they blame. It will be you." Kody laughed harshly, but inside he could feel the shudder of fear. For the first time, his grip was loosening. The contract that had been his shield was now turned against him in the hands of those he had attempted to silence. The insider had teased one final revelation, something so explosive that it would not be able to be ignored. Christine and Janelle had been waiting with bated breath, understanding that whatever was next would decide their next step. And then, the file appeared, late one evening. Its subject line was brief, terrifying, Season 20 Master Clause. When they read it, they caught their breath. The clause was incriminating. Evidence that Kody had negotiated for himself an unwieldy share of profits, even going so far as to specify that in the case of family failure, his payment would be higher while the wives' portions would decrease. He had literally made money off their demise. Christine covered her mouth to keep a sob in, and Janelle was in stunned silence. This was it. The smoking gun. The clause established beyond question that Kody had founded his empire on deceit, that each tear that fell on screen was dollars that could be counted in his bank account. The query now was not whether they would act, but when the walls were closing, the lies were coming apart, and as Season 20 approached, Christine and Janelle understood one thing: the same contract that had wrecked their family was going to wreck Kody as well. The Master Clause was a detonator, ready to be triggered. Christine and Janelle sat in stunned silence after reading it, both comprehending the enormity of what lay in their hands. It wasn't merely proof of Kody's greediness. It was the template of their agony set in ink of law. All the betrayals, all the fake fights, all the emotional ruin had been orchestrated as part of a deliberate scheme. An installment clause in the contract guaranteeing that the worse their family fell apart. The wealthier Kody grew. Christine's tears were infused with rage. "He broke us up for money," she whispered. Janelle nodded, her voice shaking but firm. "This isn't just a betrayal of us. It's a betrayal of our children, of everything we sacrificed." They knew there was no going back. The file had to be exposed. But the question was how. If they went to court, TLC's legal army would bury them under mountains of paperwork, and Kody would spin it as bitterness from wives who couldn't let go. If they headed to the media, the account could be blasted as gossip without concrete evidence. They required a game plan that would cut through the public account and not leave any space for refusal. That is when the insider imparted an idea. "The audience trusts you more than they trust him." The voice continued. "If you tell it straight out in your own voice, with the papers to support you, they can't shut you up." Not this time. Christine's mind was whirling. She'd always been the emotional truth bearer, the one who spoke up what everyone else was afraid to say. Janelle added logic, organization, and credibility. Together, they could land a blow that Kody would never get over. They started making a video raw, unedited, filmed in secrecy. No production team. No high quality cuts. Just two women sitting together with a pile of contracts between them. Christine was the first to begin, her voice shaking but getting stronger with each sentence. "For years, you've seen our family disintegrate. What you didn't realize is that much of it wasn't natural. It was written, plotted, signed into being. This isn't real, it is manipulation, and Kody signed off on every bit of it." She brandished the contract, the camera panning in on underlined areas. Janelle continued. "This provision shows that the more dysfunctional our family got, the better off financially he was. He had a vested interest in allowing us to fail, allowing our children to starve, allowing our marriage to fail. And he did so willingly." Their words were like burning embers. They did not rant. They did not dramatize. They merely stripped the truth to the bone. Document by document, clause by clause, revealing Kody's betrayal with irrefutable evidence. When the video went online, it detonated like a bomb. Hours later, hashtags trended globally. Former fans who had stood up for Kody against the show turned on him in rage. "How could you sell out your own family?" One viral post read. Another had said, We were believing we were seeing a family. We were seeing a con. The media picked up the news, playing side footage of the leaked contracts and the show's most dramatic moments. The story changed overnight. TLC rushed to issue statements, professing ignorance, distancing themselves from Kody. But it was too late. The term contract clause was forever associated with greed and betrayal, and for Kody, the consequences were apocalyptic. He attempted to lash out, showing up on television shows, referring to the papers as misinterpreted, and accusing Christine and Janelle of distorting reality. But with each word, more evidence emerged. Leaked emails, insider accounts, and financial documents all showed the same damning evidence. Kody had benefited from his family's ruin. Robyn remained with him at first, her allegiance unmoved, but the force of public anger was overwhelming. Paparazzi were on their tail. Online trolls flooded their social media, and even neighbors gossiped behind closed doors. Robyn's face, once the picture of the committed wife, now a symbol of denial. Her trust in Kody slowly began to crumble as she came to the realization that even she had been played, her commitment reduced to an added bargaining piece in his master scheme. The other wives, including Meri, were drawn into the tempest. They had been silent, complicit, or too shattered for years, but finally saw their chance at freedom. Meri, sick of being labeled the pariah, came forward on Christine's and Janelle's behalf. "They're telling the truth," she stated softly but strongly. "We all suffered under those contracts. We just didn't realize how deep it went." Her statement fanned the flames. The scandal went to courtrooms, boardrooms, and newsrooms. Lawsuits came out of nowhere, former cast members alleging they too had been under coercive contracts, children of the family complaining about the psychological cost of being made into storylines. TLC was under investigation. Sponsors dropped out, and the popular show hung in the balance of disintegrating. And Kody, he became the public face of betrayal. No amount of attempting to rehabilitate his image could offset the power of the documents. His empire began to fall apart bit by bit. Appearances were cancelled, business deals collapsed, and his finances, so long camouflaged, were scrutinized. The wives, once held captive under his shadow, started to take back their lives. Christine set about rebuilding trust with her children, proving to them that their suffering had not been for nothing. Janelle walked in independence in a new clarity she had never experienced before, making her life a beacon to others who felt caught in manipulation. Even Meri experienced an odd freedom in choosing to be on the side of truth, unencumbered by the silence which had strangled her so long. The coup de grace came when a judge examined the contracts during a court case, precipitated by the revelations. His words rang out in the courtroom and into national headlines. These documents show a systemic pattern of exploitation. They don't reflect the values of family. They reflect greed, manipulation, and control. The verdict wasn't just condemning Kody, it was revealing the seedy underbelly of an industry that profited from fractured families and staged mayhem. Christine and Janelle stood outside the courthouse, their hands clasped tightly together as reporters swarmed. Christine's voice cracked as she addressed the cameras. "We were silenced for too long, but now the truth is out, and we're free." Janelle added, her eyes shining with determination. "This isn't just our story, it's a warning. Contracts like these destroy lives. We will not let that occur again." Their fearlessness echoed far beyond their own household. Viewers who had been passive receivers of drama previously began questioning what was real, what was staged, and how much suffering lay behind the scenes on other reality shows. The ripple effect was certain, and Kody, by himself, humiliated, and without power, he roamed the remains of the empire he had lost everything to create. He had the wealth once, the celebrity, the glory, but it had come at the price of his wives, his children, his reputation. Ultimately, the contract that had ruined his family ruined him as well.